Okay, another video, and today's topic is going to be on ADHD and anxiety and how to tell the difference between the two, if I can. Just want to start out by saying a big thank you to Tracy Goodman as well. Thank you for the comment and the donation as well to the channel. Yeah, I didn't even realize that was a thing, and didn't see it 6 months ago. I've only recently seen it, so yeah, shout out to you, Tracy. So there's obviously a huge difference between the two in terms of how they're diagnosed and what they actually mean. ADHD being a neurodevelopmental disorder, whereas anxiety being a mental health disorder. But I feel like there's a huge amount of overlap between the two in how they present and how they can affect your life on like a day-to-day basis. Examples of which being like difficulty concentrating, having racing thoughts all the time, sort of being quite restless generally. And I think I've definitely become confused and struggled with dealing with which one is which in certain situations, which I think is quite impossible anyway, to be honest. But in terms of where they differ, things like trouble focusing, I've kind of narrowed it down to ADHD difficulties with focus are more kind of like a wandering attention in general, whereas anxiety seems to be much more preoccupied with worry itself. I think that can present with when I'm trying to sleep, for instance. It's hard to tell whether it's anxiety keeping me up or kind of ADHD symptoms keeping me up. Anxiety being more like, again, worrying excessively, ADHD being more like just having a really overactive mind. It's just darting in different directions. You can't tell where your thought stream's going to go. Whereas anxiety seems to be more of like a core focus of what your worry and dis-ease is about, I guess. And again, for a symptom like restlessness, ADHD is more like hyperactivity, whereas anxiety to me feels much more like just a physical like lack of ease in my body or physical tension, I guess. I'm kind of coming to terms with the differences between the two and trying to work out how different symptoms present themselves and what I can categorize them in. And I think I'm doing that in a way of kind of trying to put them in perspective. So like ADHD symptoms seem to be much more persistent and lifelong, whereas anxiety to me is usually much more tied to situations. It's much more like episodic. It will come and go. So yeah, moving on to my like main experience and why I really wanted to make this video was, as I said in the update last week, I think it was, I recently started as a physio for the NHS in sort of June, July time, and since then I've been, you know, like when you're learning new things, everything just seems to be really quite overwhelming and provokes anxiety. And I've been trying to figure out if it's anxiety or if it's ADHD symptoms. And that's been really difficult, to be honest, to kind of distinguish between the two. Dealing with difficult situations with co-workers, patients, whoever it might be, and trying to figure out whether I'm worrying at the time or if it's just my ADHD rearing its head more than normal. It's been tough, because some days I'll deal with certain situations much better than others, and that makes me think that, okay, this is more than likely just anxiety, because it's more episodic. Like I said, some days can be one thing won't affect me, whereas another day it'll be a huge deal. And so I feel like if it was ADHD, it would kind of always be a bit of an issue or a big issue potentially. So I've been thinking a lot about the two and speaking with my partner about it as well, and trying to work out like how I can kind of deal with it a little bit better, I suppose, because work's inevitable. Anxiety, I suppose, is pretty inevitable, and dealing with the consequences of ADHD or the symptoms of ADHD for me is inevitable as well. And I guess I'm just trying to find the line of where to cut myself more slack than in one situation compared to another, if that makes sense. And I think the biggest way that I've been working on that is just talking it through with my partner and getting her kind of perspective on things, how she might have dealt with whatever it is if it would have given her as much anxiety as it did me, or if she would have dealt with it a different way, if it would have affected her at all. And yeah, that's been really helpful, because it's just kind of given me, I've been able to hold a mirror up to myself a little bit and say, well, maybe you're being a bit of a drama queen here, and in other situations maybe I'm just not giving myself any slack whatsoever, and I need to go a bit easier on myself in those times. Another way that I've been trying to distinguish between the two is, I know I spoke about this before on the channel in one particular video, it's meditation. So if I can sit down after a work day for 10-15 minutes or so and just bring a little bit of perspective to what's happened in the day and how I've dealt with it, what I might have done differently, that's been so beneficial for me to gain a little bit of understanding, and has given me a bit more context as to kind of what's happened in the grand scheme of my kind of career development and things. And it's allowed me to maybe learn a little bit from it, rather than it just being a bad or difficult situation. And I think diagnosis is obviously massive here, because the symptoms do overlap quite a lot. It's probably quite difficult, particularly if people who don't have a diagnosis of either, for them to kind of chalk it up to one of the two. So I think getting a diagnosis, or at least speaking to someone, the diagnosis doesn't make the biggest difference, but at least speaking to, whether it be your GP or seeking a referral for an evaluation for ADHD, is massive, because there are hugely different treatment approaches for the two of them, and finding the right one for you might fix a lot of your issues. For me, it seems as though they cross over hugely, and that might be the case for you as well. But at least talking it through with someone who knows what they're talking about, and not just some bloke on the internet, it would be hugely beneficial, I think. So it's more of just a kind of rambly video today, I suppose, about what I've been dealing with more recently, and the sort of struggles that have come along with that, in I guess the kind of mental tension or something within me that's been trying to work out which one is the cause. And what I've come to decide is I'm just going to try and kind of normalize it in my own head a little bit, and give myself a bit of a break for not understanding which one it is, and it might be a combination of the two. And I think if you guys are having the same issues, that's one thing that's helped me in dealing with it, is giving myself a little bit of a pat on the back for just dealing with it, whether it's one or the other. It doesn't make the biggest difference. It's kind of more about how you've tackled the situation, rather than what may have caused it in the first place. And so I think the takeaway message is going to be, if this does sound like something that you're dealing with as well, but you don't have a diagnosis, you may not want a diagnosis, but perhaps it's worth speaking to someone just to get a bit of an understanding as to why it may be the case for you. But I want to say, yeah, from me, it's okay to have both. Whatever it is, you can deal with it. Just, yeah, speak to maybe loved ones, friends, whoever it might be, and go from there, really. I'd love to hear any of your experiences about the topic of today's video, if you happen to have any. So yeah, do feel free to leave a comment down below what you guys have dealt with in the past with ADHD, anxiety, both, neither, whatever it is. But that's going to be it for today's video. So thanks for coming back and watching. The Q&A video is coming up. I might actually release them as kind of separate videos on a particular question, because I can probably ramble on each topic for a little while, and rather than making it like an hour-long video, it might be easier to just do them separately and and kind of cover it a bit more thoroughly. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.